So, boys, say stay tuned. There's a gewaldige podcast. Rabbi Steve Geller does a gewaldige Zach, and that'll be coming out this week. Torah Giants on Chumash. Shalom Uvrach, and welcome to the weekly piece on the Parsha from Torah Giants on Chumash, written by Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Goodman, the Rabbi Emeritus of Yisroel Far Rockaway. Sit back and enjoy.
Welcome to Torah Giants on Chumash. I'm Steve Geller. We have a very special piece for you and some great surprises before we're done. This week in our Parsha, it says, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, Hashem your God shall you fear, him shall you serve, and in his name shall you swear. Chazal tell us in Masechta Pesachim that Rav Shimon HaAmsoni found a way to interpret every S, Aleph Taf, in the Torah to include something beyond the phrase in question. That is up until he came to this pasuk of fearing S, your God. The word S is usually used grammatically as a bridge between a transitive verb and its object. Rav HaAmsoni apparently could find no other object to add to the fear of the one and only God. And from this point onward, he stopped his interpretations. But the Gemara tells us Rabbi Akiva explained that this S also is inclusive, for it adds fear of Torah scholars, our walking, talking Sifrei Torah. It appears odd that the Rav, who worked for countless hours in clarifying every other S up until this point, would just give up, only to have Rabbi Akiva easily pronounce a reasonable and sound suggestion. Rav Shimon Rosenberg, Rav of Unsdorf, offers explanations to this puzzle. Perhaps Rav Shimon conceived of Rabbi Akiva's explanation, but felt that it would offend those who were not Torah scholars. This would also include those who never had an opportunity to learn to begin with. Not wishing to hurt any Jew, he ceased his interpretations. However, Rabbi Akiva, who had been ignorant of Torah until he was 40 years old, felt that every Jew could become a scholar if he makes the effort. He was the living proof that it's never too late, thus he felt no hesitation about expressing this interpretation. Also, according to the Gemara, Rav Shimon is described as giving drushas, a term used for pulpit rabbis giving sermons in shul, for example. So his audience likely included many unlearned people. He could not include Torah scholars in his interpretation of our pasuk, for how could his simple audience understand a Talmud Chacham's connection to Hashem? Rabbi Akiva is described as teaching rather than discoursing. Obviously, this refers to his own students, who surely knew the concept of awe and the nature of Hashem. Therefore, he could appropriately say that S includes Torah scholars before whom one should indeed stand of awe, for they are the walking encyclopedias of God's oral law. Rabbi Goodman points out that of the many interpretations he'd seen about this subject, this ingenious explanation is the only one that focused on the differences in how the Gemara described the actual people who these two rebbeim were addressing. Rav Meir Shapiro of Lublin offers an excellent point regarding Rabbi Akiva's recognition that Torah scholars should be respected on the highest level. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Deis that the central or middle path is best amongst all the traits of character, avoiding extremes. However, one who recognizes that he has an extreme, inappropriate trait must solve that problem by tilting to the opposite extreme until he's recalibrated and can settle on the middle road. Since Rabbi Akiva admitted that when he was still an ordinary shepherd, he could have bitten a Torah scholar like a wild donkey, once he turned his life around, he recognized that he must go to the other extreme. Thus, in his eyes, his respect and awe for a Torah scholar became almost equivalent to his awe of Hashem, so that he was the perfect person to recognize this interpretation. But it turns out there are other brilliant facets to this very point. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Steve, it's going to take more than you to drive home the point of the critical importance of honoring our Talmidei Chachamim. Well, I'm way ahead of you. We're incredibly fortunate to have the brilliant Rabbi Motti Neuberger, Associate Rav of Congregation Kneseth Yisroel, the White Shul in Far Rockaway, to himself prove the great value of our Torah scholars and to give incredible color and depth to this concept.
So the Chidah says something absolutely astounding. The Chidah says, we know that the Gemara tells us that we couldn't figure out, Yirmiyah Novi couldn't figure out why the Churban was happening. So the Gemara tells us in Maseches Nedarim, Alma Ozda Haaretz, why was the land destroyed? And finally, the answer comes, Asha Ozvim Es Teirasi, because they left the Torah. Shelo Berchu B'Torah Tchila, the Gemara says. But it's hard to understand, because they didn't make Birchas HaTorah, so therefore we had a destruction of Beis HaMikdash. Birchas HaTorah is somewhat something which is a mitzvah daraisa, but that's the thing. They're learning Torah, it sounds like, but shel berchu b'Torah tchila. So the Mefarshim explain because they didn't respect, they didn't value Torah enough. So the Chidah says that's what the pasuk means. Sha'ozvam es Torase. They lost the S of Torah. es l'rabbis talmidei chachamim. They didn't have respect for Talmidei Chachamim. If you don't have respect for Talmidei Chachamim, so then automatically you lose respect for the Torah, you lose respect for people giving you Musar, and there's no way for you to change. Says the Chidah, where did it all begin? They didn't know how to darshan the S. Sha'azvim S Teirasi. They lost the S of my Torah. If you know how to darshan S l'rabbis Talmidei Chachamim, then you'll be on the right path. And even when you're not on the right path, there'll be Talmidei Chachamim to get you back on the right path. Gemara says they didn't listen to Musa in the door of Beis Hamikdash, of Churban Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because they didn't have S. Sha'ozmim S Teirasi.
Revisiting Rabbi Goodman for a moment, at the end of the piece, he says, I cannot resist inserting a clever pun made by Rav Harry Wahlberg some decades ago. When you hear this story, you just know it perfectly captures Rabbi Goodman's beautiful sense of humor. Rabbi Wahlberg arrived at a Catskills hotel to participate in a rabbinic convention and entered the dining room where a huge feast, typical of Catskill hotels, was in progress. Remember that in Yiddish, the word S means eat. So with a twinkle, he remarked that had Rav Shimon Hamsoni witnessed this banquet, he would also have realized that S includes Torah scholars. Just another example of how Rabbi Goodman brings it all together in this amazing collection, and another example of why you should like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and most importantly, share this video with friends and family. It's the simplest mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It'll brighten their day, and you'll help realize the full potential of Rabbi Goodman's life's work, Torah Giants on Chumash.
Stumped him. So the way that I understand it, and the way it was explained to me, is that S is always what the Sefarim call a nitba. It doesn't mean just conclude a random thing. It's something which enhances the major thing. So let's say Kabet es avich ve'esemecha es l'rabbis achicha hagadol. It's not just a new thing, achicha hagadol. Achicha hagadol, your older brother, means way of respecting your parents is through achicha hagadol. That was like a way of showing respect to your parents, that the one who's considered to be the memala makom of your father, even he, I'm going to respect. So S always has to be something which is a derivative, if you will, of the main thing. It can't just be a random thing. So Shimon Hamsuni said, I could do that for everything in the world, show like a tafel, except for the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's no one that's even close, that could be even considered a somewhat close or somewhat comparable to the Rebbeinu Shalom, that we could even say Es l'Rabbis. There's nothing even on the same category. There's nothing in the same plane. There's nothing that you could say like, oh, this will be a derivative. The Rebbeinu Shalom is in a totally separate league. So definitionally, he was against. It wasn't just he couldn't think of something. He thought of something for every other S in the Torah. It wasn't he couldn't think of something. He was, philosophically opposed to darshaning this S. And Rabbi Kiva comes and says, that's not because you have so much respect for the Rebbeinu Shalom, but because you don't appreciate what Talmidei Chachamim are. Es l'rabbis Talmidei Chachamim, you don't realize that a human being, through the Torah, could actually become close enough to the Rebbeinu Shalom, dovek to the Rebbeinu Shalom, that he could be considered Es l'rabbis.